Alright, so looks like my storage got full, so my last video cut out in the middle of it. I do apologize for that, but I will waste no time in getting back in and finishing up books 11 and 12. Sorry again for that, but let us continue. So, we're gonna get this epic theme starting in line 251, and exile is a theme in Paradise Lost, but it's also just a general theme in the epic poetry tradition of the Western world. So, in a sense, we get many aspects of this with exile. There's I guess let's cover the theme of exile in the Western tradition. Sorry, a little scatterbrained from this camera thing, but we get a sense of this in the Hebrew Bible, right, where Abraham is called out to leave and to go inhabit Canaan. Moses is born and raised in Egyptian culture, and he has no choice but to leave. Ruth has to leave Moab with Naomi, and then the divided nations, Israel and Judah, are exiled into Assyrian and Babylonian captivity, eventually restored but not restored in a sense as well, right? So we get these themes of exile, but we also get them in the classical tradition as well. So um, Socrates was going to be condemned, and in a sense, he could not handle exile, and perhaps that's why he had to die. But for Aeneas, Aeneas was exiled because he had no other choice. Troy was being destroyed; it was literally burning behind him as he leaves. We see that in the first book of the Aeneid, right? So Aeneas was forced out in a sense by destruction. For the philosopher theologian Boethius, he dealt with exile, which also happened through political circumstances, similar but different to Dante. He dealt with exile by finding eudaimonia in God, regardless of his circumstances and being removed from everything he had built up in life. And for Dante, his exile involves a loss of culture, a loss of history, a loss of community, a loss of relationships with certain people, and then Milton, in a sense, was also in exile. Even if he had never had to leave England fully, he was a part of Cromwell's group. He was really kind of on the ends with the political power for about a decade. But when the restoration of the monarch Charles II came in 1660, he ultimately lost out, and he kind of just had to. He was blind, by the way, but he also had to basically retire and really kind of just reserve himself to writing. Milton was, in a sense, also exiled away from having vision, in the sense that he lost his ability to see, and therefore he could no longer pick up a book and read words on a page. He could no longer pick up a pen and write and know if he was actually writing something that made any sense or not, because he couldn't see the pages and he couldn't check that out. So he lost, in a sense, the freedom to read and to write and to be involved in politics in a way as well. And so exiles is this grand theme in epic. It happens all over the place. Um, Definitely look out for that. But we're seeing that here, and we're all exiles, right? We're all exiles longing for another world. We're all, marred by original sin, and we're um, anticipating the New Jerusalem. We're anticipating participating with God fully in the heavenly realm, beholding the beatific vision. We all long for that. So we're all exiles in this world. We're all part of Adam's exile from Eden. We've all, lost paradise, right? Like we're all there. We're all participating in the rebellion of Adam, in a sense, in that way, and we all have to deal with that. So exile ties in with the theme here greatly as well. But then around line 334 to 69, we're still in Book 11, by the way. There's going to be this mandate to basically to subdue, conquer, and rule, and this has not gone away. And Michael takes the time to remind Adam of this, so he still has these responsibilities to basically to be fruitful, to multiply, to establish civilization. So all these things are still part of the world, and obviously we're going to see how that unfolds in history in a way. Another thing we see in Book 11 is that the Christian hero learns from suffering. So let me read to you lines 370 through 76. This is Adam talking to Michael, by the way. To whom thus Adam gratefully replied, Ascend! I follow thee, safe guide, the path thou leadest me, and to the hand of heaven submit, however chastening, to the evil turn, my obvious breast arming to overcome. by suffering and earn rest from labor won, if I so may attain. So there's a sense here where another epic convention is there's struggling here, there's suffering, right? Like Aeneas perhaps embodies this better than any of our classic epic heroes, as he has to suffer and struggle through the transition from Troy to the Latin Peninsula, where he's going to establish his kingdom, where Rome is ultimately going to be founded. But there's an epic struggle here for the Christian as well, that sometimes suffering is deserved, and sometimes it may even be not deserved in the case of someone like Noah or Job. But we must go through it to learn and cultivate the proper virtue. And obviously, the case with Job and Noah is a bit distinct. I don't want to comment on that or say it's exactly the same as this theme, but in a sense, we get the story of Abel and being murdered by Cain here, and Abel is a character that really embodies that archetype of being the just man who suffers unjustly, right? It's in a different way than Job and in a different way than Noah, all of them different from each other. But there's a pattern here. Like suffering is just it's going to exist, and it's going to exist sometimes as a consequence and sometimes just because. But we need to learn from it, and that's being established here as well. And Adam's being told that, of course, as our first parent. And so we get this interesting perspective here with Adam, kind of a perspective of how Adam's seeing things here. And he says, line 870, by the way, O thou, who future things canst represent as present, heavenly instructor, I revive at this last sight, assured that man shall live, with all the creatures, and their seed preserve. We get this perspective here where Adam is really seeing all the things at all time, and this is called, if you ever look up triptych art, this is a type of art that displays different parts of history and different ideas alongside each other, where we get this overarching view of things. And so Milton is kind of in this section creating a type of giant triptych here, in a way, where he's showing us all these different parts. Adam is seeing like the scenes of the world unfolding around him in a way. The way Milton plays with time here is really fascinating, so I hope we can talk about that more on the Wednesday night class. But then we get the ending here of Book 11, not the ending of the poem, that'll come soon, but I'd just like to read this here really quick. So, Michael ends the poem talking to Adam. He says this: So willingly doth God remit his ire, though late repenting him of man depraved. Grieved at his heart, when looking down he saw the whole earth filled with violence and all flesh, corrupting each their way. Yet, those removed, such grace shall one just man find in his sight, that he relents not to blot out mankind, and makes a covenant never to destroy the earth again by flood, nor let the sea surpass his bounds, nor rain to drown the world with man therein or beast. But when he brings over the earth a cloud, will therein set his triple-colored bow, whereon to look, and call to mind his covenant, day and night. Seed time and harvest, heat and hoary frost, shall hold their course, till fire purge all things new, both heaven and earth, wherein the just shall dwell. So we get this established at the end. God is good, God is just, God is patient. He makes covenants, he makes promises to us, particularly to his people, but judgment will still come in the end. And so Book 11 ends with this promise that just as the flood ended the world once, the world will be judged and destroyed. And I'll talk about typology here in a second. The flood is really in some circles seen as a type of really what final judgment will be, in a sense, as well. And as we see descriptions of that throughout the New Testament, particularly in Revelation as well. But moving onward to Book 12, so Michael is going to begin again. He's going to finish the rest of the story, obviously, here. And but he's almost telling another story as if it's like a sequel or a continuation of the redemptive history story. So we get like a little break there, and then he starts talking again at line 6. But one thing that Milton's going to really develop out here in the history of civilization, since civilization has kind of but not really been established yet, we're going to get to the Tower of Babel and the nation of Israel and the surrounding nations and all of that as it will happen. But Milton's going to really develop out this theme of tyranny here, something he felt very strongly about in his own lifetime, being involved in politics, having issues with the papacy, the Roman Catholic magisterium, and really the church as a whole. Similarly, in a lot of ways, the way he feels about the Church of England and the monarch. He's going to be commenting on tyranny a lot. He sees that as an important theme to assert. And so, as civilization and political philosophy develop, so does tyranny, naturally, because the world has fallen, and rulers are going to squander the opportunity that they were given to steward well. They're going to mess it up, and that's going to cause tyrannical powers to be in place at times. And we all know that's true. We read history, we look at world news today and look at various things going on in current events, and we know tyranny is just there. It just will be. And this is an abstract problem, but Milton makes it concrete and practical as is necessary because it's a harsh part of this life that we live. Milton and Dante both believe that they faced tyranny at times in their lives and that they suffered the consequences for it. And so, I don't have the line numbers for this written down exactly, but at different places Milton gives us another epic convention of cataloging. He gives us this catalog of tyrants where he talks about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. He talks about Pharaoh. He's going to talk about different tyrants. I can't remember if he talks about Nebuchadnezzar or not, but he definitely mentions Nimrod and Pharaoh pretty early on. But there is this sense where we get of like, what does it mean to actually be a faithful nation in contrast to all these pagan, godless nations in a way. And there's ultimately, this is really back to Plato in the Republic, but he's establishing this assertion that there's a need for these cities to be just, and that the only way for that to happen, really, in this sense, is for God to call one particular man, Abraham, out and to basically start a theocracy through him, and that God's going to give them these laws. And from lines 240 through to 80, Milton really, he takes time to really describe these laws, especially around lines 270 to 284. And he basically tells you, just as we see in the Torah or the Pentateuch, exactly what it should look like for a nation to be a faithful Christian nation, a nation to be a properly ruled and governed, just nation. And God took plenty of time and gave us plenty of information and knowledge on how that should look. But anyway, I said I would talk about typology, and so here's what lines 303 to 36 say. Up to a better covenant, disciplined from shadowy types to truth, from flesh to spirit, from imposition of strict laws to free acceptance of large grace, from servile fear to filial, works of law to works of faith. So, if you're not familiar with typology, and we get a lot of this in books 11 to 12, but the type are these shadows or these pictures or images of what is ultimately going to be fulfilled. It's a bit of foreshadowing, if you may. And the antitype is the term used for the substance or the thing that all of the types are fulfilled in. So you think of David, like there will be a king from the line of David that will rule on the throne forever. Christ is the antitype of David. He rules on the throne at the right hand of the Father forever, right? He's a David, Moses, Abraham. These figures are very obvious types of Christ in a lot of ways. So that's really how typology works, and Milton's really drawing us into that here. Now, there are these conversations about why this even works, and this arises in a lot of patristic discussions about how the Old and New Testaments are so connected and related to one another. And you have to remember that the Gnostics really saw a very sharp contrast between the Old and New Testament, so badly that they even brought it to the point where there were two different gods, an evil god of the Old Testament and a gracious god of the New Testament. And I recommend the work by Saint Irenaeus Against Heresies. He was a 2nd century bishop in Lyons, which is modern day France. And he's a good source for reading on this. But Irenaeus does a lot of work with like biblical theology, redemptive history, typologies, and so he's a good person to read for that. specific area as well. But Adam also is by definition a type. He's not the substance of the type. Um, there's typologies made in the New Testament about Christ being the new and better Adam, and that's what's being asserted here in a sense. And so in lines 375 through 85, we get really this theme of hope being put on display. And this is Adam talking. O prophet of glad tidings, finisher of utmost hope, now clear I understand what oft my steadiest thoughts have searched in vain. Why our great expectations should be called the seed of woman, Virgin Mother, hail! High in the love of heaven, yet from my loins thou shalt proceed, and from thy womb the Son of God most high. So God with man unites. Needs must the serpent now his capital bruise expect with mortal pain. Say where and when their fight, what stroke shall bruise the victor's heel. And then that's where Michael is going to come in, and he's going to answer these things. But Michael explains all that to Adam, and Adam has this sense, and if you read the broader context of this, where the fight is almost going to be like some sort of knightly tournament or some sort of gladiatorial tournament where Christ is going to come and slay the dragon, right? But Michael is telling him that this is not going to come in a typical epic fashion. It's going to come through the perfect obedience of Christ. So starting at lines 395, and this is part of Michael's response. Nor can this be but by fulfilling that which thou didst want, obedience to the law of God imposed, on penalty of death, and suffering death, the penalty to thy transgression due, and due to theirs, which out of thine will grow. So only can high justice rest apaid. The law of God exact he shall fulfill, both by obedience and by love, though love alone fulfill the law. Thy punishment he shall endure by coming in the flesh to a reproachful life, and cursed, death, proclaiming life to all who shall believe in his redemption, and that his obedience imputed becomes theirs by faith, his merits to save them, not their own, though legal works. So we get the gospel right there, right? Like it's through Christ alone that we are saved. It is through Christ alone that we are redeemed. And he does what Adam failed to do to redeem us, be obedient fully in human life to God, in fullness of his humanity while retaining the fullness of his divinity, known as the hypostatic union, the union of the full divinity and the full humanity of Christ, two natures in one person, Jesus Christ. And so Christ can't just defeat the dragon. He has to save the church. He has to save God's people, and he has to arm them spiritually to protect them from evil. So it's fundamentally different in many ways than the natural epic conclusion to conquest, in a way, to conquering something. And so naturally we come to the end of the poem, and a friend and colleague of mine once shared with me that when he read Paradise Lost for the first time, he got towards the end and he was sad about the fact that there would never be more unread lines of Paradise Lost. So instead of finishing the poem, he went back and reread the whole thing and then basically finished it. If I'm remembering the story right, I think that's exactly how he ended it. But nevertheless, he was so moved by the beauty of Paradise Lost that it was hard for him to finish it, because he knew he could never finish it for the first time again. And I think that's beautiful. And if that's your journey, I want you to think about that here. I recommend you finish the poem so we can discuss it. But reread it, and reread it again, and reread it more times, and reread it for the rest of your life, because Milton is worth that. I absolutely believe it. So let's end this together, my friends. So spake our mother Eve, and Adam heard, well pleased, but answered not. For now too nigh the archangel stood, and from the other hill to their fixed station, all in bright array, the cherubim descended. On the ground, gliding meteorous as evening mist, risen from a river o'er the marish glides, and gathers ground fast at the laborer's heel, homeward returning, high in front advanced. The brandished sword of God before them blazed, fiery as a comet, which, with torrid heat and vapor as the Libyan air, adust, began to parch that temperate clime. Whereat In either hand, a hastening angel caught our lingering parents, and to the eastern gate led them direct and down the cliff, as fast to the subjected plain, then disappeared. They, looking back, all the eastern side beheld of paradise, so late their happy seat, waved over by that flaming brand. The gate with dreadful faces thronged and fiery arms. Some natural tears they dropped, but wiped them soon. The world was all before them, where to choose their place of rest, and Providence their guide. They, hand in hand, with wandering steps and slow through Eden, took their solitary way. It's a lot to take in, but what a beautiful ending. Um, Milton ends with faith, hope, and love. What Dante needed to ascend into the Paradiso. Adam and Eve, they need faith, hope, and love to go out from Eden into the fallen world. We need faith, hope, and love to go out into the world ourselves every day. I need faith, hope, and love to do this video, and I need faith, hope, and love to end this video and go off and work and do things the rest of the day. We need this in the fallen world. They have been armed with faith, hope, and love, and God is with them. Providence is with them. But they are also still exiles, just as we are exiles in need of all these things. Milton is always drawing us in with these themes, that the same is true for them as it is for him in the 1660s and 70s, as he lives out his last days composing and revising Paradise Lost. And it will be true until Christ returns and final judgment is complete. I hope that reading Paradise Lost has been a great, not just insightful and interesting, wondrous work to you, a great piece of literature, but I hope it has been devotionally rich to you as well. I hope that it encourages you in your walk of faith in this life. And if you somehow hear this and you're not a Christian, then I hope this draws you into the Christian faith in some way, that the Lord uses it, and that you will want to seek out a local church and people you know who are Christians and talk to them about these very things. This is a wonderful, beautiful work. It deserves our time. Keep reading it, and I look forward to our discussion on Wednesday. Thank you so much for sticking with me and listening to all these videos. It is a great honor and privilege of mine to have been able to walk you through this. So thank you so much, and God bless you.